Welcome to Carter's Retro Reviews. Today we're going to be doing a review on Duel for the Sega Saturn. Now let's get the obvious thing out of the way. This game is deathly expensive. It costs between $500 and $1,000 on eBay. And that's an insane amount of money, quite frankly. But the good news is that there's more than one way to play this game that doesn't involve spending that kind of cash. I won't get into the finer details on what that is exactly, but just know that you do have options. What it does is it raises the question, what is the value of a video game? Because I can't think of a single video game that I like or can recommend strongly enough that would justify a $500 price tag. But on the other hand, as a collector, I would love to have a $500 video game up there on my shelf somewhere. I mean, it'd have its own section of shelf, it would be vacuum sealed for sure. It'd have its own downlight, one that doesn't emit too much heat. I mean, I haven't given it much thought, but just know that I completely understand if you decide to spend that sort of money. So the good news is, this game is excellent. So you're either falling into one of three camps. Either you have no interest in this game, in which case you don't have a shoe in the race, or you are definitely going to buy this game because, let's be honest, you are probably going to buy it before you watch this video, or you just can't afford it, which is where I fall into. That's the camp that I fall into. So with all of that said, let's look at the review for Duel for the Sega Saturn. Duel is one of the most notorious games on the Sega Saturn. Not only does it fetch insane amounts of money now, it's nearly always been an expensive game. Perhaps there was a sweet spot after the demise of the Saturn circa 1998 where you could have picked this game up for a steal in the absence of YouTube and eBay. And I realise too that this video is not going to help things no matter what I say, because the moment you take an interest in the Sega Saturn, there's a handful of titles that appear almost immediately as highly sought after. And it's easy to see why. They are the best that the Saturn has to offer on a relatively obscure console by a popular gaming brand. People spend the 30 minutes looking at the list of games, and it's hard not to be impressed with the quality of titles being released around this time. With the exception of a few games, they would be unobtainable purely on price. I can't think of any game that can't already be found on eBay, and the dedicated corners of the internet can find private sales on these hard to find games, depending on your willingness to pay the price. The game was developed and published by Technosoft and released in the arcade in October 1993, then released in November 1996 as a console exclusive for the Sega Saturn in Japan. If you haven't heard of Technosoft, they were the company that created the illustrious Thunder Force series. I've been waiting to use that word for a while now, illustrious. They also did Blastwind, which was another exclusive for the Sega Saturn in Japan. After seeing the slew of titles that ended up in the West, seeing this game certainly would have helped boost its popularity. But I also feel this game's popularity is linked somewhat to its price and its difficult to obtain status. It would still be a popular game, no doubt, as many other shoot-em-ups on the console are given equal billing as excellent games, but many of those are expensive games too. I'll save you the hassle of listening to the rest of this review by saying this game is, without a shadow of a doubt, an excellent game. But here are the details for those who want to know more. The opening video, while being short, is really good and sets the stage for the game. Presentation from the menu to the in-game is just exceptional. The colour contrasts in ways that makes the font stand out while giving everything equal billing. When you look around at the things that don't catch your eye immediately, it's clear that there was not only love and passion that went into this port, but details as well. Location of the elements are where they're meant to be, but the only thing really worth noting is how the text used for scoring is a bit bigger than normal. But that's more of a reflection on the bombastic nature of this release. The game is intense wall-to-wall action. I was going to cover this under presentation, but the bullets and power-ups are well defined with a great looking colour palette. It's buttery smooth with no glitching or tearing or any visual problems of any sort. I did, however, get this initial feeling that a few of the backgrounds were a little sparse, but upon subsequent playthroughs, it turns out I was just on drugs. Sure, there were moments I might have focused on in the beginning, but they were fleeting. Games just like this are what the Saturn are all about. Sega promoted the console as a 2D powerhouse, and I'll be damned if Duel doesn't double down and come out on the other side smelling of roses. Excellent parallax scrolling and great detailing makes this aspect of the game a real highlight. I just want to show you the graphical differences between the Saturn mode and the arcade mode because the variation between the two doesn't really change much. It's clear to me that the Saturn version is the better version because it's brighter and there's better detailing in both the foreground and the background. But what's really interesting is the gameplay, which I'd normally cover off under a different section, but it's only a minor change, and that is the spaceship felt looser in the arcade mode, and they seem to have tightened that up in the Saturn mode, for better or for worse. The soundtrack is hot garbage. Imagine if that's how I felt. It's great. I mean, you spend most of your time hearing pew pew pew, so the sound effects are top notch, but the soundtrack is also excellent. The music and gameplay are a match made in heaven. The control scheme is simple. The A button makes you shoot in fighter mode and gives you a standard shot, and B button is armor mode. Don Pachi does this as well, where you become slower to move but have a much stronger shot. Perfect for bosses. You can also aim your shot 45 degrees above or below you and collect power-ups. You have 3 different Buster Gears / mechs to choose from. Storm Forgel, or Forgel, which is piloted by Keith Spader, I wonder if he's related to James Spader. High Mustang, piloted by Lisa Rowland, and Phalanx Smasher, which sounds like a rough sex move, piloted by Dr. B. Lloyd. Not only is the control scheme simple, but it's also reactive like the first responders in Chernobyl. There are 8 levels and a 2-player. There's also a Saturn mode and an arcade mode. The arcade mode is simply a port, and the Saturn mode has reworked graphics and sound with a few small changes to Stage 3 and Stage 4 bosses. Would I recommend this game? If we're simply talking about the game and no other aspect, I would absolutely, definitely recommend this game 100%. But at the time of writing this review, this game starts around the $600 mark, which is not something I'd recommend unless you planned on buying this purely for collection's sake.